get control of the ball game, when they allow that stuff to happen, and it's been happening all season long. All season long. It's not just this game, it's been happening all season long. This is what happens, right? This is what happens. You've got competitive women who are the best in the world at what they do, right? And when you allow them to play physical and you allow these things to happen, they're gonna compete. And they're gonna have their teammates' backs. It's exactly what you expect, right? Out of fierce competition. So I started talking to the officials in the first quarter, and we knew this was gonna happen. You could tell it was gonna happen. So they got to get control of it.
The moment Marina Mabrey shoved Caitlin Clark to the hardwood on June 17th, she didn't just cross a line on the basketball court, she accidentally triggered something far more powerful than any WNBA investigation. She turned America's basketball, Golden Girl, into a political weapon that Republican senators are now wielding against an entire league. And frankly, what I've been filtering through the digital breadcrumbs suggests this is just the beginning of a culture war that's about to consume women's basketball. Look, I've been connecting the dots on this story for months, following the temperature of the online conversation, and what other channels won't tell you is that this stopped being about basketball the moment Senator Jim Banks put pen to paper. When a sitting Republican senator sends a formal letter to the WNBA commissioner demanding answers about how Caitlin Clark is being treated, we're not talking about sports anymore. We're talking about political mobilization. So, before we dive into the roadmap of how exactly Republicans are weaponizing Caitlin Clark's treatment, let me be crystal clear about what we're dealing with here. This isn't speculation anymore. We have documented evidence of congressional oversight, mainstream media framing this as civil rights violations, and Stephen A. Smith himself warning that the Trump administration could leverage this situation for political gain. The narrative temperature mapping shows we've crossed from sports controversy into full political theater. Here's what we're going to unpack in the next 20 minutes. First, the smoking gun evidence of how Senator Banks's formal letter transforms Clark from athlete to political symbol. Then, the insider intelligence on how Republican strategists are positioning her treatment as their newest culture war battleground. And finally, the angle nobody's covering about how this political weaponization could fundamentally reshape not just the WNBA, but how sports leagues handle their biggest stars when politics come calling. The story starts where most of these political weaponization campaigns begin, with a Wall Street Journal op-ed that reframes everything. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened next reveals a coordinated political response that nobody saw coming.
And keep an eye on her and JC Sheldon. Clark trying to back her down.
Clark is okay.
Sheldon, that was Clark, hitting her in the face. Clark is upset about that. Then everybody's upset about that. Marina Mabrey comes in. She decks Clark, tempers flaring on both sides.
When Marina Mabrey decks Caitlin Clark in that game footage, she's creating more than viral content. She's creating political ammunition. And the digital breadcrumbs I've been following show exactly how this transformation happened. The Wall Street Journal piece by Sean McLean didn't just call for an investigation. It specifically framed Clark's treatment using language that every political operative recognizes: hostile work environment and comparisons to corporate discrimination cases. Those aren't sports terms. Those are legal frameworks that create political talking points. Now, let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. Multiple sources are reporting that Republican Senator Jim Banks didn't just casually mention this situation. He sent what's being described as a formal letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert demanding answers about Clark's treatment. That's not a sports fan expressing concern. That's congressional oversight in action.
Ms. Clark's targeting may reflect a culture of disparate treatment, and the evidence provides reasonable cause for a federal probe into potential civil rights violations. Am I making it up now? Remember I said this months ago. Remember I talked about people being jealous. The Cheryl Swoops of the world and others. Remember I pointed that stuff out? Remember I talked about the rough housing?
But here's what they missed that makes this political weaponization so effective. Caitlin Clark isn't just any athlete who can be positioned as a victim. She's the WNBA's commercial golden goose, driving a 601% spike in merchandise sales, 170% increase in fever viewership, and 366% jump in League Pass subscriptions. When Republicans T120 position her as under attack, they're not just defending an athlete. They're defending America's newest sports superstar, and that's politically powerful. The temperature of the online conversation shows this political framing is working exactly as intended. Conservative media outlets are amplifying the protection narrative, while traditional sports coverage struggles to keep up with the political implications they never saw coming. So what's fact and what's speculation? Let's break it down with insider intelligence that other channels are completely missing. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, Stephen A. Smith's analysis reveals the political strategy in real time. According to reporting I've been tracking, Smith specifically warned that the Trump administration could leverage Clark's situation as politically expedient to feed his base. That's not sports commentary. That's political strategy analysis. Think about what that means. One of ESPN's biggest personalities is openly discussing how a basketball incident becomes political fuel for a presidential administration. We've crossed into territory where sports media is analyzing partisan political calculations, and that tells you everything about where this story is heading.
He commits a hard foul on J.C. Sheldon. Again, as J.C. Sheldon is going up for a layup, Sophie bear hugs her and takes her to the ground. What I will say is Sophie did not grab her and throw her to the ground. She didn't body slam her. She didn't do anything, in my personal opinion. Maybe I'm biased here, but I'm gonna give you guys my straight up honest opinion on this. She bear hugged her, took her to the ground. Yes, it was intentional.
When Fever coach Stephanie White says officials have been letting this happen all season long, she's providing exactly the evidence Republicans need to argue this is systematic. Political operatives don't need to manufacture a narrative. When you have the victim's own coach documenting a pattern of failed protection, but the story doesn't end there, because what I've discovered through investigation is that Republicans aren't just reacting to this situation. They're actively shaping how it gets framed. The angle nobody's covering is how perfectly Caitlin Clark fits the Republican political narrative framework. She's the wholesome Iowa superstar, breaking records, driving historic viewership, representing everything positive about American athletics. When she gets attacked by competitors, it creates a protection dynamic that political strategists dream about. Now, let's pull the thread on exactly how this political weaponization is playing out at the highest levels of government. I've been filtering through the noise, and the signals point to something unprecedented in women's sports. When Senator Jim Banks sends formal correspondence to the WNBA, he's not acting as a concerned basketball fan. He's establishing congressional interest in how America's biggest women's sports league treats its most commercially valuable player.
Action caused an entire brawl because now Sophie Cunningham had to come in the game and get Caitlin Clark's lick back. She had to come in and protect her teammate because of your wrongdoing. You didn't have no reason to be blindsiding her like that. No reason. And what are you even doing this year? Are you even playing this year? Marina Mabrey, are you playing? I ain't seen you play in a long time. And y'all
The digital breadcrumbs reveal this formal letter specifically demands answers about Clark's treatment, positioning it as potentially discriminatory. That language choice is deliberate political strategy, creating the framework for federal oversight of a private sports league. Okay, now let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter about potential federal civil rights investigations is too loud to ignore. Multiple content creators are claiming evidence of reasonable cause for a federal probe into potential civil rights violations. While no official federal investigation has been announced, the narrative framework is being established for exactly that possibility. That brings us to the inevitable question that's driving Republican political strategy. If the WNBA can't or won't protect America's basketball sweetheart, why shouldn't Congress step in? So, what's really happening here? I've been connecting the dots, and what emerges is a sophisticated political weaponization strategy that transforms individual incidents into cultural battleground territory.
The moment came in the third quarter after Fever guard Caitlin Clark was poked in the eye by Sun guard J.C. Sheldon while Sheldon was playing defense. This led to a brief scuffle between Clark and Sheldon. Actually, it led to J.C. just kept running up on. I watched the video again. I was like, why is she doing that? Clark is obviously trying to get some space away from her, and she made it worse, which prompted Connecticut veteran Marina Mabrey to come up and shove Clark to the ground. Is that what we're calling it? Because it wasn't a shove. It was, I'm going to drive my entire body into your body. That's what that was.
When that sequence escalates from an eye poke to Mabrey driving her entire body into Clark's body, it creates visual evidence that political operatives can replay endlessly. It's not abstract policy discussion. It's clear visual narrative of America's sweetheart getting attacked while officials do nothing. The temperature of the online conversation reveals how effectively this resonates with Republican-base voters. Conservative social media is documenting every incident, creating detailed timelines, and positioning Clark as representing traditional American values under assault. But here's what the other channels won't tell you about how this political weaponization really works. It's not enough to just defend Caitlin Clark. Republicans are using her treatment to question the entire WNBA power structure, from Commissioner Kathy Engelbert to the referees to the players who target her.
And Marina Mabrey comes out of nowhere and chucks her to the floor. Now let's watch this in slow motion. Here, J.C. Sheldon is guarding Caitlin, swipes her in the face. There's one. Going for the ball, swipes her in the eyeball. Caitlin's gonna have to start wearing goggles. And then Caitlin pushes her off of her, like, why are you still in my face? Marina Mabrey, bat out of hell, chucks Caitlin Clark to the ground. After this, you guys, of course, the referees are going to review the play because that's a lot of contact going on right there. That's a lot of unnecessary contact. That's a lot of non-basketball contact happening during this play, right? So the three referees that I like to say, they got them straight out of Sephora because I don't think these referees have ever refereed a professional basketball game in their life. They took these referees, they were at the monitor, they looked at it for, I'm not even exaggerating, you guys, like 15 minutes. 15 minutes they are watching this play over.
When content creators describe Mabrey as a bat out of hell who chucks Caitlin Clark to the ground, they're creating exactly the inflammatory language that political campaigns thrive on. This isn't neutral sports commentary. This is partisan framing that positions Clark as victim and her competitors as aggressors. Reading the signals from mainstream media coverage, what's emerging is a coordinated effort to establish federal interest in Clark's treatment through civil rights frameworks. I've been filtering through the noise, and what I've discovered is that multiple sources are positioning this as potential workplace discrimination. The Wall Street Journal's framing of hostile work environment isn't accidental language. It's creating legal and political precedent for federal oversight.
Mabrey concluded. So at the end of the day, it was a play on the ball when she did it, and I probably overreacted a little, but my teammate is getting hit, and I'm not okay with that. It wasn't like I hate her. Here I do. I don't do stuff like that. Everybody knows that I've never done that before. It's fascinating to hear Mabrey reflecting on a moment that vilified her to a huge portion of WNBA fan base. Yeah, Marina Mabrey, that was dirty. Let's just be clear here. That was dirty. You know it was dirty. You know what you did was dirty.
When Marina Mabrey admits she probably overreacted a little, while simultaneously claiming the upgraded foul was just due to fan reaction, she's providing exactly the contradictory statements that political operatives can exploit. Her words become evidence of both acknowledgement and dismissal, perfect for political attack campaigns. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, the federal investigation framework is being established. Through multiple channels, Senator Banks's formal letter creates congressional interest. The Wall Street Journal op-ed establishes legal framework. Stephen A. Smith's analysis provides media validation. Content creators document visual evidence. That's not accidental coordination. That's political strategy in action. The narrative temperature mapping shows this federal investigation framing is gaining traction across conservative media, creating pressure for actual government action, even if none currently exists. But the story doesn't end there, because what I've been tracking through social media intelligence reveals how Republicans are using Clark's treatment to mobilize their political base around sports issues.
Let me tell you something. You over here talking about, yeah, I overreacted. People who overreact, they do life in jail. People who overreact, they catch domestic violence cases. People who overreact, they catch assault charges and things of that nature. If you don't know how to play basketball without overreacting, maybe you shouldn't be here. To be swinging on Aaliyah Boston, to be knocking Caitlin Clark on the ground, and you're still able to just go up and down the basketball court like it's another day, I think it's disgusting.
When content creators call Marina Mabrey a slime ball who viciously attacked Clark and promise, "We're not going to leave it alone, we're going to stay on you," they're creating the sustained pressure campaign that political movements require. This isn't just fan anger, this is organized political mobilization. The digital breadcrumbs show this mobilization expanding beyond basketball into broader cultural territory. Conservative social media is connecting Clark's treatment to discussions about bias in sports, media coverage, and institutional protection of American values. So, what's fact and what's speculation about where this political weaponization is heading? Let me break down what the signals are telling us. The official record shows Senator Banks has established congressional interest. Multiple mainstream outlets have framed this as potential civil rights violations. Political commentators are openly discussing partisan political calculations. That's documented political weaponization. But I've been filtering through the noise, and what emerges is a broader strategy where Republicans position themselves as protecting American sports icons from institutional bias. Caitlin Clark becomes the prototype for this political approach. When they spend 15 minutes reviewing obvious contact before making inadequate calls, they're creating exactly the evidence Republicans need to argue institutional incompetence or bias. Every delayed decision, every upgraded foul, every non-ejection becomes political ammunition.
Announcers here saying, of course, Marina Mabrey is going to get ejected because that was unwarranted. She literally came out of nowhere and chucked Caitlin Clark. There should be a flagrant one, of course, on J.C. Sheldon because she swiped her and hit her in the eyeball. Whether it is intentional or not, you can still have a flagrant a flagrant foul called on you, whether you are trying to intentionally hurt somebody or not. But this is what they called, you guys. This is what they called. Caitlin Clark, Marina Mabrey, Tina Charles were assessed with technical fouls on Tuesday. Caitlin, Marina, and Tina Charles. Technical fouls. That's it. Technical fouls. That's it. And J.C. Sheldon was assessed with a flagrant 1 foul, and no players were ejected.
The angle nobody's covering is how this creates precedent for federal oversight of sports leagues when they involve politically valuable figures. If Congress can demand answers about WNBA officiating for Caitlin Clark, what stops them from questioning NFL player treatment, NBA referee decisions, or college sports management? Reading the signals from Clark's commercial impact reveals another layer of this political weaponization strategy. When Clark drives 601% merchandise spikes and 613% app engagement increases, she becomes too valuable commercially to allow political targeting. Republicans can position themselves as protecting American business interests when they defend her treatment. The temperature of the online conversation shows this commercial protection angle resonating strongly with conservative audiences who view successful American businesses as worth defending.
He incited several technical fouls, but it prompted Fever enforcer Sophie Cunningham to essentially start a brawl by grabbing and throwing Sheldon down to the ground 1 quarter later. Mabrey gets honest. 2 days after the shove, heard around the women's basketball world, Mabrey was heard saying, quote, "Damned if I do, damned if I don't," when addressing a commentator on the Instagram live stream who called her out for shove. "I thought it only got upgraded to a flagrant 2 because of the way the fans reacted to it," Mabrey said of the shove on Clark. "They gave me a technical for it initially. I don't care, honestly. I really don't. Obviously, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm not trying to go after certain players for certain shit. Me and Caitlin were cool. Me and Caitlin have competed against each other in the playoffs. She threw me into the benches in the quarterfinals. We didn't go after her for it. She's competitive. I was about trying to get the ball. I get it. Throw me out of bounds. We got back up and kept competing." Yeah, but the problem is when this incident happened, you were not competing. There was not actual basketball being played.
When Marina Mabrey's actions are characterized as dirty repeatedly, it creates simple political messaging that Republicans can deploy across multiple platforms. You don't need complex policy discussions when you have clear video evidence of America's basketball sweetheart getting attacked. But here's what they missed that makes this political weaponization so effective for Republicans. The WNBA finds itself in an impossible position where any response can be used against them politically. If they overprotect Clark, they face accusations of preferential treatment from other players and fans. If they underprotect her, Republicans position it as institutional bias against America's sports sweetheart. Either response becomes political ammunition. The digital breadcrumbs reveal this impossible position is exactly what political strategists want. When institutions can't win regardless of their response, it creates ongoing content opportunities for political mobilization. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the investigation patterns, Republicans are creating a template where sports controversies involving politically valuable figures automatically become federal oversight opportunities. I've been connecting the dots on how this political weaponization extends beyond basketball into broader cultural territory. When Republicans position Caitlin Clark as representing traditional American values under attack in women's sports, they're creating culture war content that energizes their political base while expanding into sports audiences. The narrative temperature mapping shows this approach working across multiple demographics who don't typically engage with political content but respond strongly to protection narratives around American sports icons. When Mabrey claims she was just trying to get the ball, despite the incident happening during dead ball play, she provides exactly the kind of obvious contradiction that political campaigns can exploit endlessly. Her explanations become evidence of institutional dishonesty. That too brings us to the inevitable question driving Republican political strategy. If federal oversight can be established for WNBA officiating, what other sports leagues could face similar congressional scrutiny? The signals I've been tracking suggest this creates precedent for federal involvement in sports whenever politically valuable figures are involved. Republicans aren't just defending Caitlin Clark. They're establishing governmental authority over sports institutions.
Is on Caitlin Clark from Kathy Engelbert. Y'all all know it, so y'all are taking advantage of it. Period. That's what's going on right now. And I'm glad the higher ups, people higher than Kathy, are now talking about investigations. Stephen A. Smith, major platforms are now talking now. And now y'all are scared. Y'all should be. Some of y'all shouldn't.
So, what's the ultimate goal of this political weaponization? Reading the digital breadcrumbs, it appears Republicans are positioning themselves as the political party that protects American sports icons from institutional bias, creating ongoing campaign content while expanding their cultural influence. But the story doesn't end there, because what other channels are missing is how this political weaponization connects to Republican campaign strategy for 2025 and beyond. When Republicans establish themselves as defenders of America's sports sweetheart against institutional bias, they're creating political messaging that works across multiple election cycles. Caitlin Clark's treatment becomes a case study they can reference in campaign materials, fundraising appeals, and media appearances. The temperature of the online conversation shows this approach resonating particularly strongly with suburban voters who care about sports but don't typically engage with political content. That's exactly the demographic expansion Republicans need for electoral success. I've been filtering through the noise of how Republican political operatives are leveraging mainstream media coverage to amplify their messaging. When the Wall Street Journal frames this as potential civil rights violations, Republicans don't need to make those arguments themselves. Mainstream media establishes the legal framework, while Republicans position themselves as responding to independent journalism. That's sophisticated political strategy, where partisan officials can claim they're simply responding to mainstream media concerns rather than manufacturing political controversy. The digital breadcrumbs reveal Republicans are creating a template where sports controversies become political opportunities through mainstream media validation rather than partisan political attacks. So what does this political weaponization mean for the WNBA's future relationship with Caitlin Clark and federal oversight? Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the institutional pressure patterns, the league now faces ongoing congressional scrutiny whenever Clark experiences controversial incidents. That's unprecedented federal involvement in such professional sports officiating. The narrative temperature mapping suggests this creates permanent political pressure where the WNBA must consider Republican political reactions to their officiating decisions. That's not sports administration anymore. That's political calculation. Reading the signals from how this political weaponization has developed, what emerges is a replicable template Republicans can apply to future sports controversies. Identify politically valuable American sports figures. Document institutional failures in their treatment. Frame protection as defending American values. Establish congressional oversight through formal correspondence. Create sustained pressure campaigns through social media mobilization. That's not reactive political commentary. That's systematic political strategy for expanding Republican influence into sports entertainment. The angle nobody's covering is how this approach could transform how all major sports leagues handle their biggest stars when political attention focuses on their treatment. But here's what I've discovered through investigation that reveals where this political weaponization is ultimately heading. Republicans aren't just defending Caitlin Clark. They're establishing precedent for federal oversight of American sports institutions whenever politically valuable figures are involved. That could fundamentally reshape how professional sports leagues operate under potential government scrutiny. The signals I've been tracking suggest this creates ongoing political opportunities where Republicans position themselves as defenders of American sports excellence against institutional bias. Every controversial call, every rough play, every officiating failure becomes potential political content. That's not sports commentary anymore. That's political strategy, where American athletics becomes partisan campaign territory. So there's the insider intelligence on how Marina Mabrey's shove accidentally transformed Caitlin Clark into a Republican political weapon. From Senator Banks's formal letter to Stephen A. Smith's warning about Trump administration leverage, we're watching sports controversy become systematic political mobilization. The digital breadcrumbs reveal this is just the beginning of Republican political strategy that uses sports figures to expand cultural influence while creating ongoing campaign content. Caitlin Clark stopped being just a basketball player the moment congressional oversight entered the conversation. That's the angle other channels won't cover because they're still thinking about this as sports controversy when it's actually political weaponization with implications far beyond the WNBA. What do you think about Republicans mobilizing around Caitlin Clark's treatment? Are we watching legitimate protection of American sports excellence or calculated political exploitation of basketball controversy? Let me know your perspective in the comments below.